East Asia, including China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, plays a major role in global economy due to its strong manufacturing and export. During the Trump administration, the United States used tariff to reshape trade, especially with China. This policy disrupted the global supply chains and strained international economic ties. Now we will explore the policy, the responses, and the wider impact. I will present a brief overview of the tariff policy introduced by the United States under President Donald Trump, focusing on its impact on East Asia. In 2025, the administration intensified its approach by launching the reciprocal tariff plan to address trade imbalance and respond to unfair trade practice. The United States began imposing tariff in 2018 under Section 301, with rate from 10% to 25%. In 2025, the reciprocal tariff plan introduced broader and higher tariff, escalating tension with East Asia. Under the new plan, China got the highest tariff, up to 145% on key goods like steel and technology. Japan faced 24% plus 25% more on car. South Korea had a flat 26% on all export. Taiwan was taxed 32%, but semiconductor were not included because the United States depends on them. There were several motivations behind this policy shift. The US aimed to reduce its trade deficit, particularly with China. It also sought to protect domestic industries and jobs, counter intellectual property theft, and limit forced technology transfer. Another goal was to reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains and encourage more balanced trade relationship with the US allies. The tariff also serves security goals. They targeted technology and defense sectors to protect national interests. The US wanted to rely less on East Asia for key technologies and strengthen its position in the region. In short, the Trump administration used tariff to influence trade and protect national interests. This approach changed how the US dealt with East Asia both economically and strategically.
The Trump administration's tariff had a major impact on East Asia, especially China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. These economies rely heavily on export to the US, so tariff of up to 32% on goods like electronics and steel cause immediate pressure. Specific effect for each country. For China, severe tariff caused major export decline, shift export via Southeast Asia like Vietnam and Thailand. For Taiwan, faced tariff but semiconductors were spared. Concern over 5% drop in manufacturing value boosts US import to maintain relations. For Japan and South Korea, they were hit hard in their automotive and metal industries, adjusted production and sourcing strategies. Retaliation and supply chain disruption. China imposed retaliatory tariff on US goods, raised import costs, and disrupted supply chains. Taiwan avoided retaliation, focused on stability. Overall, US-East Asia trade shrank and global trade fell by around 6 to 8%. Adaptation and long-term effect. Companies relocated production to avoid tariff, increased cost and investment risk. East Asia diversified trade to Europe and Asia, then highlight risks in global supply chain independence. Region showed resilience but faced uncertainty.
In 2018, the Trump administration launched a trade war that reshaped global economics. Using Section 232 and 301 tariffs, the United States targeted steel, aluminium, and China's unfair trade practices. But East Asia didn't stay silent. China, Japan, and South Korea responded in very different ways. While China fought back aggressively, Japan and South Korea balanced retaliation with diplomacy. In 2018, China imposed 25% tariff on $50 billion of United States goods, hitting politically sensitive sectors like soybean and automobile. By 2019, tariff expanded to $60 billion, with rates up to 25%. But China didn't stop there. It weaponized non-tariff barrier, delaying customs for United States firms, and restricting rare earth minerals. Unlike China, Japan responded cautiously. It imposed limited tariffs, just $54 million on United States pork, wine, and ethanol, avoiding major political backlash. Japan also joined the EU in a WTO case, the S556, but soon turned to diplomacy. The 2019 US-Japan trade deal tied agricultural tariff but left out automobile, a key United States demand. This partial deal showed Japan's strategy, which is protect economic interests without endangering a security alliance with America. South Korea took a different path. Instead of full retaliation, it negotiated a steel tariff exemption with quotas. It filed a WTO complaint, the S557, but dropped it after a deal. The reverse Korea's FTA 2018 extended United States auto quotas and drug tariff easing tensions. Why? Because for South Korea, security ties with the United States were too vital to risk. Instead, it diversified trade, joining deals like RCEP to reduce dependence on America. South Korea
Now, let's look at the key economic disruption caused by the tariff. East Asia, which include China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, supplied a large share of America's electronics, machinery, and semiconductor. When tariffs were imposed on this import, the result was more than just pressure on foreign market. The disruption extended to supply chains within the United States, especially in key domestic sectors like manufacturing and technology. One of the most visible impacts was the increase in consumer price. Everyday goods such as smartphones and laptops become more expensive. On average, United States households paid between $800 and $1,000 more per year. Businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, face rising input costs and financial strain in trying to maintain profitability. The job market was affected in different ways. While steel and aluminium sector experienced slight job growth, technology and automobile industry saw job loss due to their dependence on East Asian component. Tariff also contribute to inflation, particularly in areas like electronic and household goods, where consumers felt noticeable price increases. In the long term, many companies began shifting their supply chain to countries in South Asia and Latin America. However, this process was expensive and complicated. The Biden administration chose to continue many of the existing tariffs, reflecting the economic and strategic tension with East Asia remain an ongoing issue for the United States. To conclude, although tariffs were intended to protect domestic industry, they also created wider consequences within the United States. This included higher consumer prices, job disruption, and long-term supply chain adjustment. Understanding this outcome reminds us of the complex and interconnected nature of today's global economy.
So, moving on to the last part, I'll be explaining how Trump's tariffs affected East Asian countries like China, Japan, South Korea, and also Taiwan. These countries had to rethink their trade and economic strategies because they were very dependent on the United States market. The tariffs caused a strong reaction across the region, and it led to some major long-term changes. One of the biggest changes was in supply chains. A lot of companies started using what's called the China Plus One strategy, which means they kept some operations in China but moved others to countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, or even Thailand. Big companies like TSMC in Taiwan and some South Korea manufacturers also expanded outside China to reduce their risk. Even some Chinese exporters began sending goods through Asian countries to avoid the United States tariffs. Trade pressure also pushed East Asian countries to focus more on working with each other. Agreements like the CPTPP and RCEP became more important. RCEP was signed in 2020 and started in 2022. It helped countries like China, Japan, and South Korea trade more within the region. They also strengthened trade with Asian and the European United to reduce reliance on the United States. Besides trade, the tariffs also affected global strategy. Countries started balancing their relationship with the United States by building stronger ties with Europe, the Middle East, and also BRICS countries. Japan and South Korea also worked more closely with Asia to improve regional unity. So, overall, Trump's tariffs didn't just affect trade short term, but they led to a long term shift. Now, East Asia is focusing more on stability, regional cooperation, and also being more self-reliant. Now we have come to the conclusion. Trump's tariffs caused major trade disruptions in East Asia. Key industries like steel, electronics, and automotive were hit hard, with declining exports and unstable supply chains. Taiwan was partially exempted for semiconductors, showing how vital that sector is globally. Beyond trade, the tariffs also caused political tensions. Countries had to rethink their trade strategies. Even though the United States and China signed the Phase 1 deal, it wasn't very stable. So, the United States also faced rising consumer prices and also supply issues. In response, East Asian countries built stronger regional ties through RCEP and also CPTPP. They also started focusing more on self-reliance and trade diversification to prepare for a more uncertain global economy. That's all from my group. Thank you.